Chemical Weapon Part 2. Chemical warfare agents are divided into lethal and intoxicating categories. A substance is classified as intoxicating if less than 1/100 of the lethal dose causes intoxication, throws nausea, or visual problems. The distinction between lethal and intoxicating substance is not fixed, but relies on a statistical average called the LD50. Agents: chlorine, chlorpyrene, phosgen, mustard gas. Dissemination: wind, dispersal, protection, gas masks, urinated on gauze. Detection: smell. Lucid, chemical shells, gas mask, protection, rosin oil clothing. Detection: smell of geraniums. Smell of geraniums. G series nerve agents: aircraft bombs, missile warheads, spray tanks, protective ointment, mustard, collective protection, gas mask, battle right. V series nerve agents: aerodynamic, binary munitions, dissemination, protection, gas mask, water supply, improved gas mask, protection feed, comfort. Detection: V series nerve agents, a nerve gas alarm, or laser detection. Persistence: chemical warfare agents can be classified according to their persistence. A measure of this of the length of time that a chemical agent remains effective after dissemination. Chemical agents are classified as persistent or non-persistent. Agents classified as non-persistent lose effectiveness after only a few minutes or hours, or even only a few seconds. Purely gaseous agents such as chlorine are non-precipitation, as highly volatile agents such as zarine. Tactically, non-persistent agents are very useful agents, targets that are to be taken over and controlled very quickly. Apart from the agents used, the delivery mode is very important. To achieve a non-persistent deployment, the agent is dispersed into very small droplets, comparably with the mist produced by an aerosol can. In this form, not only the gaseous part of the agents, around 50%, but also the fine aerosol can be inhaled or absorbed through pores in the skin. Modern doctrine requires very high concentration almost instantly in order to be effective. One breath should contain a lethal dose of the agent. To achieve this, the primary weapons used would be rocket, artillery bombs, and large ballistic missiles with cluster warheads. The contamination in the target area is only low or not existent, and after 4 hours sarin or similar agents are not detectable anymore. By contrast, persistent agents tend to remain in the environment for as long as several weeks, complicating decontamination. The Finns agents, persistent agent requires shielding for extended periods of time. Non-volatile liquid agents, such as blister agent and the oil Vx nerve agent, do not usually evaporate into a gas, and therefore present primarily and contact hazard. The droplet size used for persistent delivery grows up to 1 millimeter, increasing the falling speed and therefore about 18% of the deployed agent reaches the ground, resulting in heavy contamination. Deployment of persistent agents is intended to constrain enemy operation by denying access to contaminated areas. Possible targets include enemy flank positions, everything possible counterattacks, artillery regiments, command posts of supply lines, because it is not necessary to deliver large quantities of the agent in a short period of time. A wide variety of weapons system can be used. A special form of persistent agents are chickened agents. These comprise a common agent mixed with chickeners to provide gelatinous sticky agent. Primary targets for this kind of use include airfields. Due to the increased persistence and difficult of decontamination affected areas. Chemical weapons are inert agents that come in 4 categories: shocking, blister, blood, and nerve. The agent organized into several categories according to the manner in which they affected the human body. The names and number of categories varies slightly from source to source, but in general, types of chemical warfare agents are as follows. Class Nerve, Agent 9, Cyclosarin, Zarin, Zaman, Tabun, VX, VR, some insecticide, Novichok agents, mode of action. Inactivate enzyme acetylcholine esterase, preventing the breakdown of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine in the victim's synapses, and causing both muscarine and nicotine effects. Signs and symptoms: miosis, pinpoint pupils, blurred vision, headache, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, copious secretions, sweating, muscle twitching, fasciculation, dyspnea, seizures, or loss of questions. Rate of action vapors. Second 2 minutes. Skin 2 or to 18 hours. Persistence. Weeks is persistent and contact hazard. Other agents are non-persistent and present, mostly inhalation hazards. Asphyxiant, blood. Most arsenes, cyanogen, fluoride, hydrogen, cyanide. Mode action arsine causes intravascular hemolysis that may lead to renal failure. Cyanogen, chloride, hydrogen, cyanide directly prevents cells from using oxygen. The cells then use anaerobic respiration, creating excess lactic acid and metabolic acidosis. Think of and symptoms: possible cherry red skin, possible cyanosis, confusion, nausea, potence may get jobs for aid. Seizures prior to death, metabolic acidosis, rate of action, immediate onset. Persistence, non-persistent and inhalation hazard. Vesicant blister, sulfur mustard, nitrogen mustard, leucid, phosgen oxime. Agent acid-forming compounds that damage skin and respiratory system, result in burn and respiratory problems. Symptoms: severe skin, eye and mucosal pain and irritation. Skin erythema with large fluid blisters that heal slowly and may become infected. During conjunctivitis, corneal damage, mild respiration, respiratory distress to make airway damage. Rate of action: mustards vapors 4 to 6 hours and lungs affect more rapidly. Skin 2 to 48 hours with immediately. Persistent and contact hazard. Shocking pulmonary. Fluorine, hydrogen, chloride, nitrogen oxide, phosgen, Cg. Similar mechanism to blister agent in that the compounds acids or acid forming, but action is more pronounced in respiratory system, flooding it, resulting in suffocation. Serious often suffer chronic breathing problems. Think and symptoms: severe irritation, eye and skin irritation, dyspnea, cough, sore throat, chest tightness, wheezing, bronchospasm. Rate of action, immediate to 3 hours. Non-persistent and inhalation hazard. Lacrimatory agent: tear gas, CN, CS, CR, paper spray. Causes severe stinging of the eyes and temporary blindness. Peripheral eye irritation immediately. Non-persistent and inhalation hazard. Intoxicating agent 15 BZ causes atropine-like inhibition of acetylcholine in subject, causes peripheral nervous system effects that are the opposite of those seen in nerve agent poisoning. And symptoms may appear as mass drug intoxication with erratic behaviors, shared realistic and distinct hallucination, disrobing and confusion, hyperthermia, ataxia, lack of the coordination, mydrias, dilated pupils, dry mouth and skin. Rate of action inhalates 13 minutes to 20 hours. Skin up to 36 hours after skin exposure to BZ. Duration is typical 72 to 96 hours. Persistence extremely persistent in soil and water and on most surfaces. Contact hazard. Cytotoxic proteins. Agent non-living biological proteins such as ricin, abrin, mode of action, inhibition protein synthesis, latent period of 4-8 hours followed by flu-like signs and symptoms, progress within 18-24 hours to inhalation, nausea, couch dyspnea, pulmonary edema, ingestion, gastrointestinal hemorrhage with emission, and blood diarrhea, eventual liver and kidney failure. Rate of action for 24 hours. See symptoms exposure by inhalation or injection. Others more pronounced in signals and symptoms than exposure by ingestion. Slight agents degrade quickly and in environment. There are other chemicals used military that are not scheduled by the Chemical Weapons Convention and thus not controlled under the CWC treaters. These include defoliants and herbicides that destroy vegetation but are not immediately toxic or poisonous to human beings. Their use is classified as herbicidal warfare. Some batches of Agent Orange, for instance, used by the British during the Malayan emergency and the United States during the Vietnam War, contained dioxins as manufacturing impurities. Dioxin rates later than Agent Orange itself have long-term cancer effects and for causing genetic damage leading to serious deformities. Incendiary or explosive chemicals such as napalm, extensive used by the United States during the Korean War and the Vietnam War, or dynamite, because their destructive effects are primarily due to fire or explosive force and not direct chemical action. Their use is classified as conventional warfare. Mangrove forests, like the top one is east of Saigon, were often destroyed by herbicides. Delivery. The most important factor in the effectiveness of chemical weapons is the efficiency of its delivery or dissemination to a target. The most common techniques include munition such as bomb projectiles, warheads that allow dissemination at a distance, and spray tanks which disseminate from low-flying aircraft. Developments in the techniques of filling and storage of munition have also been important. Also, there have been many advances in chemical weapons delivery science. World War First Aid. It is still difficult to achieve effective dispersion. The dissemination is highly dependent on atmospheric conditions because many chemical agents act in gaseous form, such as weather observation and forecasting essential to optimize weapon delivery and reduce the risk of injuring friendly forces. Dispersion is placing the chemical agent upon or adjacent to a target immediately before dissemination so that the material is most efficiently used. Dispersion is the simplest technique of delivering an agent to its target. The most common techniques are munition, bombs, projectiles, spray tanks, and warheads. World War First saw the earliest implementation of this technique. The actual first chemical ammunition was the French 26 millimeter cartridge, suffocant, refrigerated, fire from a flare carbine. It contained 35 grams of the tear-produced ethyl bromoacetate and was used in autumn 1914 with a little effect on the Germans. And dispersion of chlorine in World War First. Shells were tested successfully out at the Warren artillery range near Cologne on January 9, 1915, and an order was placed for 15 centimeters Haughton's shells designated T shells after taping. A shortage of shells limited their first use against the Russian at Bulimov on January 31, 1915. The liquid failed to vaporize in the cold weather, and again the experiment went unnoticed by the Allies. The first effective use were when the German forces at the Second Battle of Ypres simply opened cylinders of chlorine and allowed the wind to carry the gas across enemy lines. While simple, this technique had numerous disadvantages, moving large numbers of heavy gas cylinders to their front line positions from where the gas would be released was a lengthy and difficult logistic task. Stockpiles of cylinders had to be stored at the front line position, a great risk if hit by artillery shells. Gas delivery depended greatly on wind speed and direction. If the wind was fatal and also loose, the gas could blow back, causing friendly casualties. Gas clouds gave plenty of warning, allowing the enemy time to protect themselves. So many soldiers found the sight of a creeping gas cloud in unnerving. This made the gas doubly effective as in addition to damaging the enemy physically. It also had a physiological effect on the intended victims. Another disadvantage was that gas clouds had limited penetration, capable only of affecting the front line trenches before disperating. Also, it produced limited result in World War I. This technical shows how simple chemical weapons dissemination can be. Shortly after this open canister dissemination, French forces developed a technique for delivery of phosgene in a non-explosive artillery shell. This technique overcame many of the risks of dealing with gas in cylinders. First, gas shells were independent of the wind and increased the effective range of gas, making any target within reach of guns vulnerable. Second, gas shells could be delivered without warning, expelling the clear, narrow, doorless phosgene. There are numerous accounts of gas shells landing with a plow. Second, gas shells could be delivered without warning, especially the clear, nearly odorless phosgene. There are numerous accounts of gas shell landing with a plug rather than exploding, being initially diminished as but high explosive or shrapnel shells, giving the gas time to work before the soldiers were alerted and took precautions. The major drawback of artillery delivery was the difficulty of achieving a killing concentration. Each shell had a small gas payload, and an area would have to be subjected to saturation bombardment to produce a cloud to match cylinder delivery. A British solution to the problem was a Lynx projector. This was effectively a large bore motor dug into the ground that used the gas cylinders themselves as projectiles, firing a 14 kilograms cylinder up to uh, 1,500 meters. This combined the gas volume of cylinders with the range of artillery over the year. There were some refinements in this technique in the 1915s and early 1916s. Chemical artillery rockets and cluster bombs contained a multitude of submission so that a large number of small clouds of the chemical agents would form directly on the target. If all the preventive measures fail, and there is a clear and present danger, then there is a need for detection of chemical attacks, collective protection, and decontamination. Science industrial accidents can cause dangerous chemical release, the Bhopal disaster. These activities think that civilians, as well as military organizations, must be prepared to carry out in civilian situations in developed countries. These are duties of hazmat organization, which most commonly are part of fire departments. The detection has been referred to above as a technical method discipline specific military procedures, which are usually the model for civilian procedure, depend on the equipment, expertise, and personal availability. When chemical agents are detected, an alarm needs to sound with specific warning, emergency broadcasts, and the like. There may be a warning to expand an attack if, for example, the captain of a US Navy ship believes there is a serious threat of chemical, biological, or radiological attack. The crew may be ordered to set Cycle William, which means closing call, planning to outside air and breathing air throws filters, and possible starting a system that continually washes down the exterior surface. Civilian authorities dealing with an attack or a toxic chemical incident will invoke the incident command system or local equivalent to coordinate defensive measures. Individual protection starts with a gas mask and, depending on the nature of the threat, throws various levels of protective clothing up to a complete chemical resistant suite with a self-contained air supply. They use USA military defense various levels of MOP, mission-oriented protective posture, from mask to full chemical-resistant suits, hazmat suits, the civilian equivalent, but to go further to include a fully independent air supply rather than the filters of a gas mask. Collective protection allows continued function of groups of people in buildings or shelters, the latter of which may be fixed mobily or improvised. These ordinary buildings, this may be as basic as plastic sheeting and tape, also in if the protection needs to be continued for any appreciable length of time. There will need to be an air supply, typical enhanced gas mask decontamination, whereas with the particular chemical agents used. Some non-precipitation agents include masks, pulmonary agents, chlorine, phosphonates, ozone, blood gases, and non-precipitation nerve gas (HGB) will dissipate from open areas. Also, powerful exhaust fans may be needed to clear out buildings where they have accumulated. In some cases, it might be necessary to neutralize them chemicals, as with ammonia as a neutralizer for hydrogen cyanide or chlorine. Riot control agents such as will dissipate in them. open area but zinc contaminated with Ca powder need to be aired out, washed by people wearing protective gear of safely desired. Mass decontamination is a less common requirement for people than equipment, since people might be immediately affected, and treatment is the action required. It is a requirement when people have been contaminated with persistent agents. Treatment and decontamination may need to be simultaneous with the medical personnel protecting themselves so they can function. There may need to be immediately intervention to prevent this, such as injection of atropine for nerve agents. Decontamination is especially important for people contaminated with persistent agents. Many of the fatalities after the explosions of a World War First US ammunition ship, World War Second, sorry, US ammunition ship carrying mustard gas is in the harbor of Bari, Italy, after Germany bombing on December 2, 1943 come when rescue workers, not knowing of the contamination, bundled cold, wet semen in side-fitting blankets for decontamination equipment and buildings. Exposure to persistent agents such as blister agents, wicks, or other agents may be persistent by mixing with uh, zinc cancer. Special equipment and materials might be needed. Some type of neutralizing agent will be needed in the form of a spraying device with neutralizing agents such as chlorine, Vichlor, Fichlor, strong alkaline solution of an enzyme, and in other cases, a specific chemical decontamination will be required. Manner and form. There are three basic configurations in which these agents are stored. The first, self-contained munition like projectiles, cartridge mines, and rockets. This can contain propellant and explosive components. The next form, aircraft delivery munition. This form never has an explosive component. Together they comprise the two forms that have been weaponized and ready for the internet use. The US stockpile consisted of 39% of this weapon-ready munition. The final of the three forms are all agent housed in 1-ton containers. The remaining 61% of the stockpile is in this form, whereas these chemicals exist in liquid form at normal room temperature. The sulfur mustard and HD freeze in temperature below 12.8 degrees Celsius. Mixing leaves it with distillate mustard lowers the freezing point to minus 25 degrees Celsius. Higher temperature is a bigger concern because the possibility of an explosion increases as the temperature rises. A fire at one of these facilities falls in danger and the surrounding community as well as the personnel at the installations. Perhaps more so for the community having much less access to protective equipment and specialized training. Latterly, chemical weapons are said to make the deliberate use of the toxic protection of chemical substances to inflict death. At the start of World War II, it was widely reported in newspapers that entire regions of Europe would be turned into lifeless wastelands. However, chemical weapons were not used to the extent reported by the Skarmon Gering Press. An unintended chemical weapon released a current at the port of Bari. A German attack on the evening of December 2, 1943 damaged USA vessels in the harbor, and the result release from the hulls of mustard gas inflicted a total of 628 casualties. The US government was highly criticized for exposing American service members to chemical agents while testing the effect of exposure. These tests were often performed without the consent or priori knowledge of the soldiers affected. Australian service personnel were also exposed as a result of the Brooksland trials carried out by the British government to determine the likely consequences of chemical warfare in tropical conditions. Little was known of such possibilities at that time. Some chemical agents are designed to produce altering changes, rendering the victim unable to perform their assigned mission. This classified is an incapacitating agent and latterly is not a factor of the effectiveness. Thank you for your attention.